Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
WisconsinEye coverage of the 2018 elections continues. We're at the Milwaukee Public Library. Robin R-Brookfield is a Republican candidate in the 14th Assembly District. The primary is August 14th. Robin, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you for having me.
I saw your video, and you say you want to continue the progress that Governor Walker and the Republicans have made over the last 7 or 8 years. What do you consider to be the biggest positive changes that have been made?
I think overall what the legislature and Governor Walker have been able to do in working together is lessening the role of government in their lives, whether it's taxes, regulations, and letting the private sector become more of an economic engine for the state. And that has allowed people the ability to, we've got our unemployment at the lowest levels ever, so people are finding jobs. They're in charge of their destinies, their incomes, and then on the other side of government, we're paying less in taxes at the state level.
And in that same video, you said one of your campaign goals is education reform. Can you be more explicit, please?
Sure. In Wisconsin, we have a great history of wonderful schools. In the district, people move to Wauwatosa and Brookfield for the schools. I think, though, there's a lot of good practices and best practices that are done in some school districts that need to be shared amongst the whole state. I also think that since we are at our highest level of spending on students across the state, it's maybe time to start taking a look at just a little bit closer how schools are spending the money. I had a constituent on the doors the other day tell me that they had heard, and I haven't been able to track this down yet, but that there was a school district that was hiring a bunch of new counselors or additional school counselors. And school counselors do great work. I have friends who are school counselors. But in a district where students and teachers and parents have to send paper to school and pencils and crayons and glue or whatever it might be, it would seem that maybe the salaries for counselors could be better spent on some of those things that are really needed in the classroom and directly impacting the students' ability to learn and be educated.
In the current state budget, it did include a major boost in funding for K-12 schools. Do you think there's a similar significant boost needed next year, or do you think that the current boost took us up to a reasonable amount?
I think it took us to a reasonable level at the moment. Again, I think what I would just like to see is how where schools maybe are needing more funding, where are they spending, and can we help them find ways to make it more efficient? We're doing it in the Department of Transportation. Secretary Ross is doing a great job of really creating a lean department and finding efficiencies so that the taxpayers' monies are spent, on their behalf in a much better manner. I'd like to make sure that we're doing that in the education system as well.
Transportation funding. Do you see any need to raise either the gas tax or registration fee or to toll?
Yeah, those are all options that I know that have been discussed. And having lived in Wisconsin and then worked in Illinois for a number of years, tolling is nothing that I really want to put on the people of Wisconsin. But we do have to realize that our roads are kind of the network for that economic engine of the consumer and businesses. So we do need to make sure that our roads are properly funded. I'm not necessarily in favor of raising taxes on gas or a wheel tax. If we were to raise something somewhere, I'd like to make sure we're offsetting it somewhere else, because again, my goal is to make sure that the impact on government, or that we kind of lessen the impact on government in people's lives. So let's see where we can find a balance if that's something that has to be done. But I'm hoping that what we're seeing Secretary Ross do is something that will have a long-term impact on that department, so that we are spending, again, and at a rate of efficiency, the taxpayer dollar is much better than we have in the past.
Let's go back to K-12 for a minute. The choice program started out in Milwaukee, it's grown to Racine, and now it's statewide. Are you a fan of choice?
I am.
Should it be expanded further?
I believe so, because I think that's something that when you get parents involved in what is happening in their children's lives when they send them off to school. And we find that with choice parents, they are wanting something more than for their children than what they feel that they're getting at maybe their local public school. So I think that's a good thing. And I don't think that should be contained just to certain parts of the state. I think where there's a need, if there's deficiencies, and a choice school can help bring a higher level of education, raise that competitiveness, and I think that's a good thing all around.
Two questions on healthcare. Does state government have a role, a duty, a obligation to retain and recruit nurses, physicians, and other medical professionals?
It's an interesting question, because healthcare is an entity that, because of the Affordable Care Act, again, government kind of came a little bit more intrusive in our lives when it comes to our healthcare. Now that we're peeling back some of that, what I'm hoping we see is less of a need to actually do that people will want to be doctors and nurses and health practitioners in some way, shape, or form going forward. But that means we're going to have kind of a lapse of time from people getting into medical school, because we've seen a reduced rate in that. But we have to make sure we've got the climate here for people to want to come and be their local doctor for their communities, whether it's in an urban area or in the northern part of the states where healthcare is a little bit farther dispersed.
Yeah, that's my focus next. Do you think we need to do things differently in rural areas of Wisconsin, where you have older residents and you have young people leaving and you have household income that is below the state average? Mm-hmm. Do we need to do things differently to maintain and maybe improve healthcare in the rural areas? I think
if we look at, maybe this has been done, I don't know for sure, but if we look at where facilities are in relation to, the people who have those types of needs you just mentioned, could we put a centralized, more localized healthcare entity, whether it's a clinic that's open a couple days a week inside of somewhere and we have people travel, or using technology. I spent 25 years in technology, and between telemedicine and video conferencing, there's a lot of things that can get done, by just having a nurse a video call away. We've seen that be very helpful to residents who maybe can't get very far. And then if there's a senior taxi service or something that can be set up, just helping people get to those appointments when they need it, I think that's something that can be looked at a community basis. I think that's a good thing for a community. Is it the state's responsibility? Not sure, but maybe in places where there isn't enough community, that state aid can help in something like that.
Local governments have lived with levy limits since 2006. Some local government leaders say this is hurting our ability to provide local services. Time to loosen or get rid of levy limits?
I definitely think it's something that has to be looked at. I don't want to see a community hurting so much that they aren't able to provide some of those necessary services that it is the role of government to provide to their communities. What that would be and how much that would be, I'm not really sure about that. I've had some conversations with my local representatives in the Brookfield area. Those who don't want to see undue taxes brought onto people without limits, would be against. And so that's a two-sided coin there, but I think that it's time to review. It's been 12 years, and I just don't want us to see a community be hurt by not being able to protect their citizens or provide necessary services.
Against the backdrop of school shootings and mass shootings, do we need to change Wisconsin gun laws?
I don't think we need to change our gun laws. I think we need to look at how we view our schools. They are very soft targets today, along with everything like we've seen these things happen in malls and movie theaters and things like that. We have such a strong heritage of gun ownership for hunting and different levels of sports, whether it's shooting clay, things like that. So changing the gun laws I don't think is necessary. I think we have to rethink how we look at the schools and provide them the resources to protect themselves. Different communities will have different solutions based on what the needs of that community is, and I think that's something where the voice of the community needs to be the loudest.
A big debate in the next budget will be over whether we need a new state prison. Mm-hmm. Waupun and Green Bay were built in the 1800s. We're closing our two juvenile facilities. Do you think we need a new state prison?
I don't have a yes or no on that at the moment. What my primary concern would be is safety, because the last thing I want to do is see us keep putting serial repeat offenders back out on the streets. We need space to keep them in jail, but at the same time, we've got kind of a cycle going on. If we have a soft justice system that once criminals are apprehended, arrested, and put in front of them, if they're just let go because prisons are too full, now we've just unleashed a security issue out onto the communities, and that's wrong. At the same time, to overflow the prisons to where it's unsafe for people to even work, we've got to find a happy medium. I'd like to see us get tougher on sentencing and in making sure that somebody who has just been let go on a signature bond on their 5th DUI arrest isn't put back out to do what we saw happen in Waukesha with the Good Samaritan accident, and someone who had stopped to help a mom and a daughter at 9-10 o'clock at night in the dark be run down because somebody was let on a signature bond after their 5th DUI arrest, and that's just those kind of things just aren't the right way to handle the criminal element in our communities.
UW system funding, we're in a 6th year of a freeze on resident undergraduate tuition. Mm-hmm. Should the freeze be extended to a 7th and 8th year?
At this point, I think so. Again, I think there's a little bit more long-range planning and a little more long-term discussions that need to be held on that. The disappointing thing was finding a slush fund at the UW system that nobody really knew about till the current representative of the 14th district uncovered. I think if that's there, there's probably other efficiencies and ways that we can make sure that the UW is spending the money of the taxpayers and the people that go to school there in a much better fashion. We've heard reports of, you're paying a tuition because of the professors and the learning that you're going to get from the people in the classroom, and then when the classroom is being taught by undergrads and assistants and not the professors that you're paying for, that makes me question why we would need to raise tuitions for whose benefit.
I don't think I asked you about this before. The Foxconn package of tax breaks and incentives, good deal for Wisconsin. Would you have voted for it?
Absolutely, yeah. Great deal for Wisconsin. Governor Walker was smart in how they put, and the legislature, on how they put that deal together, because yes, there are incentives, but they don't get them up front. They have to meet these criteria for them to get their tax breaks, and the construction tax break doesn't happen until 2025. So many jobs have to be put in place until their till their taxes are reduced. So good deal for the state of Wisconsin. It's going to be the largest manufacturing campus in the entire world, and to have manufacturing come back to this state. I love that we're an agricultural state and we're a tourism state, but good, honest, family supporting jobs are in the manufacturing sector, and Foxconn is jumpstarting that. We've got 90% of the contractors coming from Wisconsin. Knocking on doors, I met a young man who was moved up by his home building company from St. Louis to move here so that they could start planning on building more homes. So we're attracting people to Wisconsin, and for the right reasons.
Position on legalizing recreational marijuana or medical marijuana?
Yeah, I'm not at this point, would want to consider legalizing recreational use. Colorado has issues, and I think those things aren't being discussed and observed enough. But on the other side, medical marijuana, the non-THC cannabis, I think, is something that we do have to take a look at when we see the opioid epidemic as being, pain management, and that's what the cannabis oil can help so many people with. I mean, I've talked to a young woman who has a hard time leaving her house because of a condition that she has where her skin feels like it's on fire, and the only thing that's helped is that. I don't want to see people of the state have to put their lives on hold and she can't go out and enjoy an evening with her family because of the pain that she's experiencing. If these remedies are there, I think we have to take a serious look at how it impacts both positively, but be aware of the negatives so that we're able to address them, in the management of it from a state standpoint. But we also know there are also reports of where medical marijuana does reduce the amount of opioids that get prescribed and used and therefore abused. And so it might be something to truly consider in helping fight that battle.
Might be a next step in fighting opioid and methamphetamine and heroin addiction.
And all of that, you know. We don't want, I haven't seen the statistics on then after a certain point, are you addicted? Do you get addicted? But that's the kind of thing I think we have to be careful of, because that's where the opioids went, you know, off the charts for us and created the crime problems, you know, and the health risks that we've seen so many families decimated by.
Finally, open seat, four-way primary,
Yes.
correct? Mm-hmm. Do you want to highlight differences between you and your four opponents?
Sure.
Three opponents, excuse me.
Yeah, three other opponents, and I've worked really hard in this district for a good dozen years, working alongside the voters on a lot of issues, everything from school choice and voter ID to our Second Amendment rights, and just, again, making sure that our taxes are being spent appropriately by our governments. And so I've got a strong work ethic. I've been on the doors, not just for me, but in years past for lots of other of our good elected officials, from county supervisors and you know, and our representatives in Madison. So strong conservative credentials. I do a lot of work with the other side as well. As state president of the Republican Women, we have conversations with people from all over the state about all different issues. And I like what I've always heard Ron Johnson say, Senator Johnson, and I have this same sort of approach. I think we have to be able to sit down and find what we agree on, because I think we want safe communities. How do we do that? I think we want everybody to have their taxes spent, you know, effectively. What's the best way to go about doing that? And so I know that I would get to Madison and want to make sure that we're doing the best things for everybody in the district. But I know I would represent the people of the 14th in the best way that I can.
Thank you. Robin Moore Brookfield is a Republican candidate in the 14th Assembly District. The primary is August 14th. Robin, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.